When I stepped back and started asking the question fundamentally, what do I do that will transform communities? I started looking at the utilization of church properties. And what I found is that there's 360,000 Christian churches. And out of those churches, they close about 4,000 of them net annually because there's just not much utilization anymore. And I thought, what if we were to take these underutilized commercial properties and utilize them to full capacity? It would do two things. One, generate enough income so that that community of faith was no longer struggling and going to have to sell their building. And the second piece is it would create a hub of community.
It takes something a little more to lead with impact. I'm Lisa Nichols, author of Something Extra, and this podcast was inspired by our daughter Allie, whose additional chromosome has shaped how I see people and leadership. Each episode features conversations with inspiring leaders from around the world about what truly defines how they lead and serve others. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please consider leaving a 5-star review. It helps more people discover the show. And if you'd like to go deeper, my book, Something Extra, is available on Amazon and through other major book retailers. I'm excited to have Aaron Sanders on the show today. Aaron is the president of TN Yield Company. Well, Aaron Sanders, welcome to the Something Extra podcast. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I've been listening to other episodes, and I just love the creative community that you've surrounded yourself with. So honored to be here.
You're going to be a part of it now. And I know that you're going to really inspire our listeners. So I always love to tell our listeners how I get connected to my guest. And, it really kind of started with Jim Bechtold, who I don't know that you have met yet, but Jim connected me to Lance Welch. And then I talked to Lance Welch, and he said, you need to meet my friend Aaron. And that's the way that it all started. And you live in an amazing, amazing little community, not little, but community in Tennessee that I told you that I love, outside of Nashville in Franklin.
Yep.
Right? Such a cool community. I love that place. I've done one women's retreat there at South Hall.
Oh,
And I told you it was just the quaintest little town. I just loved
I
it.
love it. So I've been here for about 13 years, and South Hall is a really good example. So when I first moved here, there was one lone skinny donkey on a hillside, and he was right where South Hall is. And now South Hall, for those that don't know, it's a beautiful retreat place. But this area has grown really fast in a short period of time. But what's fun about that is there are a lot of people of like mind getting together, and they're thinking about expansion, not just businesses, but good families and structure around that. So it's an exciting time to be in Middle Tennessee.
I agree. I just love it. I just love it. Well, let's talk about this. I mean, you spent 16 years in the financial industry before you stepped into entrepreneurship. And I read something that you said you were highly successful, but unfulfilled.
Right. Yeah, and it really starts. I mean, just give your listeners like, who is this guy? When I was 12 years old, I was probably the most boring kid there is. I don't know if you remember. This will date me a little bit. There was an AM radio station. It was called Money Matters, and it was this radio show that you could get strategies. There was no internet back then, so at 12 years old, I would make model airplanes and listen to Money Matters. By the time I was 15, I had saved up enough money for a car. But I wanted my parents to co-sign a loan for me because I wanted to build credit. At 19, my wife and I were married, and we built our first house because I had been strategizing since I was 12, which naturally that kind of nerdiness leads you into a successful career in finance, or if you're doing anything on that level.
That is incredible. That is incredible at 12 years old that you were listening to Money
Yeah, and
Matters.
I got a newspaper route, and back then it was you'd wrap the newspaper in a rubber band and throw it out. And I had this, I got this paper route, and it was in an older neighborhood, so 55 plus is what you had to be to live in that neighborhood. And I invented a process for leaving the paper intact and putting it between the screen door and the main door so that when they open their door, it just falls onto the mat in their house. And that blew that business up 3 times what it was. And so I started my entrepreneurial bent really early and just solving problems, which is an entrepreneur's wheelhouse.
Oh, that is so cool. Well, I'll just tell you real quick. I'll tell you the whole story sometime, but I started a flower business when I was 7.
Oh, great.
The only problem is I took all the flowers from our neighbor's
Ooh,
garden.
your supply chain was faulty.
Yes, my supply chain was faulty, but my cost of goods sold were
Yes,
0.
I love the way you think.
Yeah, it was going really well until my dad found out what I had done, but that's for another
That's
day.
wonderful.
But yeah, those seeds were planted, I believe, at an early
Right.
age, obviously for both of us.
Yeah.
But I love what you said about your newspaper route. Even at that age, though, Aaron, you knew that you needed to differentiate yourself.
Yes.
So that was your differentiator. That was your little something extra that you were doing on your little paper route
Right.
there. I love
So
that.
much of it was intuitive. Now I look back and there's leadership books about all this stuff. But as a kid, I just was solving problems and I wanted to sell more papers because that gave me more candy money on a Saturday morning. So, like, was the motive. But
That was your why.
yes.
More candy.
And a skateboard. I wanted a skateboard, and that was big at that time in life.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I mean, you clearly felt something missing though, because then you did jump in you to entrepreneurship. Many people feel that innately in their gut, Aaron, in their soul, they feel that, but they don't have the courage to act on
Yeah,
it.
and that's where that theme of little something extra comes in. I because I was driven, and at 12 years old I was doing strategies, and at 16 executing things that caused me to be successful at 19 and 20. I By the time I'm 27, 28, I have stepped up the corporate ladder and I'm doing really well. I've got the 5 bedroom house, the 3 car garage. My kids go to private school. My wife stays at home. All of the things. But I would always scratch the itch of Christian expression and ministry by volunteering at my church. And I didn't want to be paid for that, but I did child and family counseling, some premarital counseling, and truly what broke me was a conversation I was having, my wife and I were having with a couple, and we were doing post-marital counseling. So this had been resulted in punching a hole in the wall at 1 in the morning, and we helped them get their kids somewhere safe, and then started the restoration process. And this lady said to me, "It's just so amazing meeting with you and your wife. It's like we've went through a dark forest all week, and we come out into this bright light on Saturday when we meet with you, but we go back into a dark forest on Monday." And this is where I started seeing the success, the resources, the 5 bedroom house, the 3 car garage. It didn't really buy me any kind of relational equity to move the needle in people's lives, which actually is what mattered to me. Resources, sometimes more money makes a bad idea last longer. And that's really where my corporate life had left me. It wasn't a great idea, but the money was there and it made it last longer. And so my wife and I
Hmm.
really asked ourselves the question, what do we need to do to put ourselves in a position that we're not just group psychotherapy to help somebody? What if we actually connected them to an expression of the kingdom of heaven that would change their lives, not just give them a moment's reprieve on a Saturday? And that was the nail in the coffin, if you will, for going down that road of what eventually led to quitting the financial world, selling everything we had, and moving to Nashville.
Hmm. Yeah. What year was that,
That was
Aaron?
2012, and we moved in 2013.
2013. So you moved from Wisconsin.
Right. We were right on
Yeah.
the Minnesota Wisconsin border. My office, everything I did was in St. Paul, but we lived in Wisconsin, Hudson.
Hmm. Well, I mean, but you and I have talked about this. God doesn't waste
Right.
anything.
That's where,
So what you had been doing in corporate, how do you think that that was preparing you for even what you're doing
yeah. So
today?
one of the things that I felt like was vitally important was utilization of commercial properties. And that's kind of started me down the path of asking, what am I doing in this corporate world is 401ks and retirement plans and billions of dollars of moved assets, but what are they actually doing to help communities grow stronger? And so then I started looking at underutilized commercial properties as part of an investment portfolio, to be honest. And what I saw is that churches tend to have the most underutilized commercial real estate. They tend to be in the best parts of town because they were started 30 years ago when there wasn't really much of a town there, or much of a city there, and the city has grown up around it. But it sat empty most of the time. And so when I stepped back and started asking the question fundamentally, what do I do that will transform communities? I started looking at the utilization of church properties. And what I found is that there's 360,000 Christian churches. And out of those churches, they close about 4,000 of them net annually because there's just not much utilization anymore. And I thought, what if we were to take these underutilized commercial properties and utilize them to full capacity? It would do two things. One, generate enough income so that that community of faith was no longer struggling and going to have to sell their building. And the
Mm-hmm.
second piece is it would create a hub of community. Any business, as you know, whether it's flowers or newspapers, is going to have an audience for it. Otherwise, you don't sell the product. And so, what if we started using those underutilized commercial properties in a way that facilitated community and connection outside of what a traditional church does Sunday mornings or Wednesday nights? What if we use those properties to highest best use? And that idea is what birthed where I'm at today and what I'm doing today.
So tell us that story. The company name comes from the Hebrew word avoda,
Yes. Avoda. If we're
right?
going to be real, if we're not going to be Midwestern
Avoda,
about it, it's Avoda. But we just say
avoda.
Avoda.
Yes. And what does that mean,
So that
Aaron?
word is a Hebrew word, and it means three things simultaneously. It means work, worship, and service. So in the original Hebrew language, when we like God is talking to people, He said there's one word for work, one word that is service, and one word that is worship. And those are three combined into one. So that's kind of the vision of the business that was started. How do we take what I do in my corporate world and facilitate a community of engaged people that are there to help one another, not just attend a church together, but what does it do to real life? And then the other piece that I just, as a business person, I know that I give charitably to a church, but when they take that money and use it to do HVAC and keep the lights on and mow the yard and all of those things that have to happen 7 days a week, when they only use it 1 day a week, it just the ROI isn't good for me. So I was
Right.
really excited to say, what if we create an outreach, a community hub of activity for that moves the needle in the community, but also generates enough income so that those charitable contributions now go to take care of the widows and the poor and the fatherless, people in our community that actually need the help. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really the impetus behind it. Now I sit in and here where I'm at is a 50-acre, 200-year-old property in Thompson Station, Tennessee, and it's originally it was a vision and an idea, but now we're actually living in it. So there today is a beautiful day here, and our coffee shop is operating. We'll have about 3 to 4,000 people a week just go through the coffee shop. Last year I put 220,000 people through this property, and it is a remember it's a church property, so it would otherwise be closed on Sunday,
Sure.
but the community of faith here has said, no, we love the vision of 7 day a week utilization. And we have story after story of lives being transformed. One of them is my favorite. I walked through the coffee shop. Now it's a busy Saturday. And on here it's in a 200-year-old manor house. So the house was built in 1819. So there's business challenges with that when you have a 200-year-old house. So there's just that
Sure.
piece. Um,
Yes.
but the coffee shop is called 1819 Coffee because the house was built in 1819. But behind the scenes, my staff knows that Matthew 18:19 says, "Where two or three agree as laying hands on any one thing, that God will be there." So I have this process in the coffee shop. It's called intentionally awkward seating. And you can't disrupt that because I want people to have to connect with one another, not just by coffee. My mission is to make them connect with one another because I know that when you have a relationship with somebody, you are statistically less likely to have depression, anxiety,
Yes.
and suicide. So the coffee shop is Matthew 18:19, we're together and God is there. But from a missional standpoint, I want people to get coffee and find their friend because their friend is what's going to prevent them from having depression or anxiety or ultimately suicide. So our mission statement says we will go after double-digit decrease in depression, anxiety, and suicide by intentionally creating a space for people to do life with because everybody deserves a community to do life with.
Yeah, Aaron, when you started describing this to me, it just so resonated in my heart. I just love it. And we'll put this in the show notes, but this is a beautiful property too. It sits on 50
Yeah,
acres, right, in Homestead Manor. So I think you host weddings
right.
there, all kinds of
Yeah,
things,
we've
right?
started. The best compliment we've gotten is the city of Thompson Station came to us and said, for all intents and purposes, your property is downtown Thompson Station because there are so many people. You can't find parking, and this is a 50-acre property, and you can't find parking at 10 o'clock on any given day because the community is loving to be out here. And you're right, it is a beautiful historic property, and the house is very Southern charm, right? Big pillars and
Mm-hmm.
all of that. And your guests can look in the show notes and see that. But yeah, it's a beautiful model. We do weddings, we do corporate events, we do fireworks shows, we do Christmas events where we make the holiday a whole holiday market onto the property in the month of December. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm sold. I want to come. I want to come. I want to come and visit because I love that area anyway. And then when you told me about this, I'm like, I am coming. I am
well, once
coming.
again, my sole mission is to create a space where people can find one another, where they can connect.
Yes.
Really, the heart of this started. We bought the property, and we didn't have a lot of money and a lot of ideas on how to move to the next spot. So I just opened up to the farmers market. Now this was August of 2020, so this was right in the middle of
COVID.
COVID time. And so
Right.
we had an event venue that was open air, and I thought, I'm going to call the farmers market people because they were meeting in the grass area around the corner out in the sun. And August in Tennessee is not a place to be in the open air. And so I called them and said, hey, would you guys want to come into our beautiful event barn and have your farmers market? And they said, we would love to, but we don't have any money. And I said, well, we've got that in common, that we don't have money. So we're just trying to figure out what to do with this property. Would you come and just bring some life to it? And that first day, there were 7 straggling vendors that came in and set up shop. I'll never forget, I set tables up outside, and a little lady was sitting at the table, and she had gotten some food from a food truck. And another lady came and timidly said, there's no more seating. Can I sit with you? And when they sat down, an hour later, I saw them still talking with each other. And so I went over and said, I just want to say that you blessed me that during COVID that you were two talking with each other. And I'll never forget this. The lady looked at me and she started crying. And she said, I moved here from New Jersey and then COVID hit and I have no friends. I have no connections. And today I just met a friend and I find that we knit. We both knit. 6 months later, there are 45 vendors, and the property's going. And I see the two ladies again, and they had formed a bond and a friendship. And it's out of that I created the 1819 coffee shop.
That is such a beautiful story. Well, Aaron, I say this all the time. You curate rooms where people come together and magic happens.
Exactly.
I'll tell you, on a much smaller scale, but when I launched my book, we had a book launch party at a beautiful venue that my team had found. And, it was an eclectic group of people, just a diverse group of people, some business colleagues, some from ministry, just friends, right? That came to the book launch party. And these two ladies came up to me afterwards. Both of them had been widowed, and they met at the book launch party, and they said, "We just met, we love each other, and we're going to start cruising
I
together."
love it. Yes.
I just it was like one of the highlights of my night, just saying, "Oh my goodness, bringing these people together, bring people together, curate those rooms, and magic
Yeah,
happens."
people are just innately amazing if you give them the chance to have a safe place to be. How often have you had the conversation with that friend who is just a safe place for you and you leave feeling so refreshed even though they didn't solve any problems? And that if we can create a scale for that, to me that's what the believer, a Christian expression should be. Like we should be able
Mhm.
to find those relationships. And I don't want a barrier of a church service at 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning to prevent somebody from having that friendship. So I built a business around it and it seems to be
I love
working.
it. I love it. Well, I have lots more questions for you, but we do need to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Aaron Sanders on the Something Extra podcast.
Hey there! In a challenging business climate like this, savvy leaders look to technology to find an edge. This can mean the difference between staying ahead of the curve or playing catch up. It's time to collaborate with the highly skilled experts at Technology Partners. Our team of technologists draws upon decades of experience for your project, with each bringing a passion for solving problems and a track record of success. How can we help you overcome your biggest technology challenges? Visit technologypartners.net to book a free consultation with one of our leaders.
So, welcome back to the Something Extra podcast, everyone, with Aaron Sanders. So, Aaron, you started Avoda Holdings in 2020.
Mhm.
What were the biggest unknowns at the time that you were facing?
So I think the biggest challenge we had is getting people to buy into a vision that a church property would be a 7 day a week thing. People have this sacred and secular concept.
Yes.
That's why I chose that word avodah. It's because it's work, worship, and service. It's only one word, but it's the same thing that happens on Sunday and Monday. So the real challenge was, one, getting the community to understand that this is a church property, but it's not going to behave like a church property. So we have something locally here called the Spring Hill I Heart It. And I don't know why it's called Spring Hill I Heart It, but it's a Facebook group. And as you know, with any kind of social media group, they have opinions about almost everything. And this church group had bought a jewel of Williamson County, 50-acre historic property that everybody felt like they owned anyway, because it's just a beautiful part of history. And we got blasted on social media because a church bought it. And you know what they would say? A church bought it. That means we're all going to lose access to this beautiful place that we never get to go, because churches typically shut their properties down. And so we had the biggest challenge we had is to grin and bear it and prove a model that is different. And after about a
Mhm.
year, all of those messages on Facebook and the naysayers were fans because,
Became
yeah, it
positive.
became
That's
very
good.
positive.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. Well, talk to me about this. You talk about creating friendship bench spaces, and we've already talked about this a little bit, but that term, I guess, comes from
Yeah,
Zimbabwe.
this was 15 years ago, and I had finished my workday and was on the drive home, and I heard NPR had a special where they were talking about Zimbabwe and the challenges they had with depression, anxiety, and suicide. Initially, they said, we're going to hire psychologists to go and counsel people in the nation of Zimbabwe, but they didn't have enough money to do that. So they got one psychologist who went village to village, and he would train the elders to sit and listen, not solve problems, just to sit in the middle of the village and listen to people. And they would leave a bench in the village after they trained the elders, and the elders would sit on that bench. Now, after a year, they had double digit decreases in depression, anxiety, and suicide nationwide in Zimbabwe. And you can Google this. There's a paper, or you can chat GPT. That's the AI thing that we're moving to. Um, it's called Zimbabwe Friendship Bench Project, and it's out there. So white paper on it and explaining why it works. But that's the model that we decided to choose. When you have 50 acres of a beautiful green space and a mile-long trail throughout, we put friendship benches out, and we staff up extra on our business model, and we staff up on our church model to just walk around and visit with people. If you're sitting on a bench, you're going to find a friend.
That's so beautiful. I love that. Now I want to put friendship benches everywhere.
What's beautiful about
Oh,
that is we've just had a tragedy in our community. So, two business leaders in our community were flying into Steamboat Springs, Colorado, and they ended up they're following their GPS right into a mountain, and it killed the business leaders, two of them, and his son and his nephew were in the plane as well. And they were an integral part of this community. I mean, they're part of the vision, and so we just had to close the door on their life yesterday at a ceremony. But the young adults were 21 years old, and their community of young adults that had been doing Bible study and life together actually got together. One of them has started a business that does metalwork, and they're all chipping their money in together to put friendship benches in honor of their friends that are fallen. And they're going to have a whole process where the young adults watch on those friendship benches to make sure that the legacy of their friends continues to go, that they have friends and connection. So it's not only just a business model to have that, it's a community piece where everybody gets to pull together.
yeah. It's so beautiful. And I think, I mean, kind of to your point, I mean, Aaron, I read all about that and have a slight connection with Taylor Husky
Oh,
through CEO Forum. But yeah, I think modern society, though, I think is starving really for real connection
yes.
and real friends. I mean, things have become so digital, and I'm grateful for technology because you can keep up with people across the miles. But I worry,
Yeah.
especially about this generation and
And
really understanding.
that's really what I saw happening. So I'm old enough now that I've got three grandchildren. I had my granddaughter born 2 days ago, so that was my youngest. And yeah, it's so
Congratulations.
fun. But I started seeing a trend pattern when I talked about 360,000 Christian churches. And if I'm going to be a believer, a Christian person, then I believe that those principles are to transform the world that I live in, not just to make me feel better about myself. But I see this trend of church properties and all these fun things that I just described to you not happening across the country. And so, why my motivation in that is what am I leaving for the next generation to have what you're talking about as AI progresses? And I love AI, I've used it for a lot of things. I think that
Yes.
technology is amazing, but it's going to be more and more vital that you have a community hub of connection. And I see that gathering on a Sunday is not growing the way that it will be there to support my grandchildren. So I pour
Hmm.
everything into this to revitalize that. I say I'm planting seeds for trees that I will never live long enough to be under.
One of my favorite quotes. And that's precisely what you're doing. That's the legacy, Aaron, that you're going to leave behind. But you talk a lot about stewardship versus ownership.
Mhm.
And I love that because I talk that way too. But what is the difference?
So I look at it as I have a mindset as a Christian of I'm advancing an outlet of the kingdom of heaven. The Bible talks about I want your will, God, to be done on earth just like it is done in heaven. And for me, that means I'm stewarding something that is owned by an entity that I work for or I serve. And it's not a corporate entity like it used to be. I look at the kingdom of heaven owns all things, and I am an Avoda. I do stewarding down here to make sure that everything advances the ideology of the kingdom of heaven, and that is at its base love. This is why we train our baristas to Instead of making it weird, sometimes Christians can make things weird. I speak to that as a Christian who
Yes.
has made things weird,
Yes.
not throwing stones. But one of the things I tell our baristas is I want you to tell that person, write something on the cup that's just one word, two words, something like that. And just tell them, when I ask what the purest love says about you, I just wrote that word on the cup and hand that to them. Make their day, right? Blow gold on them from that standpoint. But you don't have to make it weird because God is the purest of love. The kingdom of
Yes.
heaven is an outlet of a franchise of love on the earth. So why can't we just not make it weird and just say, this is what, if I think of love and you, this is what I think of. And it'll change people's lives.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so beautiful. Well, I was going to ask you because I subscribe to what you just said. Sometimes it can be
Mhm.
weird, but how can you live out your faith without being performative or
Right.
preachy to people? And that is one way to do it, right? Just those subtle little
Yeah,
things.
this I started telling this story earlier, but I'll swing back to it. It was a busy Saturday, and there's people all over the place. And I was walking through, and somebody said, "Hey, do you work here?" And I said, "Absolutely. What can I do for you?" And she said, "Can you explain the magic of this place to me?" And I said, "Well, you have to help me understand what you mean by the term magic. What are we talking about?" And she said, "Well, the magic is 2 days ago, I came to this property for the first time. And when I pulled off the road and my tires hit the rocks, I just started sobbing and I couldn't stop." She said, "My makeup was destroyed and I just wanted coffee. But I felt just this overwhelming uh, tears. I couldn't stop it." And she said, turned to the table and she said, "Today I brought my family here and I want them to experience the magic because we have a really challenging subject to discuss as a family. But I wanted to discuss it in the magic that made me cry." And I said to her, "Are you a believer?" And she said, "No, I'm not." I said, "Well, I can bring you to 5 employees right now, and I wouldn't tell them what, prep them. I would just say, what do you pray will happen when wheels hit the rocks?" Because it's a prayer we pray every day when we open our property. And
Yes.
the answer to that would be, we pray that you would encounter the purest love, that you would encounter God when you drive onto this property. And so what you experience, the magic that you experience, is the purest love. And he just wrapped his arms around you. And I turned back to her and she's crying and she says, "Well, maybe I'm a believer and I just didn't know it." So that's the covert.
That's
Don't
awesome.
make it weird. Just absolutely live out your faith and structure my business models around intentionally awkward seating and rocks that tinkle. And that means, like, my maintenance people know I don't want to hit a pothole when I come here. Well, why? Because that person's being transported. I anticipate every person having that kind of an encounter. And have you ever hit a pothole and it snaps you out of everything? I don't need that. So my
Right.
maintenance people know their avoda is to make sure there is never a pothole, that there is
No
no
potholes.
potholes. The grass,
Not no potholes allowed.
yes, and the grass is mowed nicely and the garbage is picked up and it looks pristine
Yes.
because God is going to do his part to encounter them. We're going to do our co-laboring part to make sure that nothing interrupts it.
Yeah. Aaron, I could not love what you're doing more. I truly couldn't. But I've got a little lightning round here
Yeah.
for you of questions. We could go on and on and on, but maybe we'll have to do a part two. Are you reading any kind of leadership? Are you a reader or a listener?
I am an audiobook listener, so I have
Okay.
found that I need to do 2 to 3x speed and I can listen to a lot of stuff.
Right, right. Is there one in particular that you've listened to recently that you would recommend to our
Yeah,
listeners?
I think that this is an annual read for me, and I'm in the process of going through it right now. And it is "You Are the Placebo," and it's trying to think of the author. Uh,
You are the
"You Are
placebo?
the Placebo," and it's
Okay.
really,
And you read this
yes, I
annually.
read it annually, and it is an amazing book that helps you to understand your thoughts actually create your environment, and it's a very uh, psychological way of saying, just take your thoughts captive and make sure that they are not driving
Amen.
you and you are driving your thoughts. So
Yeah.
it's so much creativity and these expressions, even like the double digit decrease in depression, anxiety, and suicide. That came from a meditation time in the manor house, asking, what can I do that will bring people into a place to get connection? And so slowing down and realizing a lot of the answers are in the 6 inches between your ears, but it's so loud that you don't slow down long enough to. Joe
Mm-hmm.
Dispenza is the author of that book.
Joe
Yeah.
Dispenza. Okay. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Hopefully, next time I ask you, you're going to say something extra.
Ah, there you go. I do have the book. It's ordered. I don't have it in hand, but I've loved hearing the concepts through all of your podcasts. So I'm so excited to read the book.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. Um, there's another one around mindset that I'm just going to mention that I've been reading that the listeners might want to pick up as well. And Aaron, maybe you've already read it, but Tame Your Thoughts
I have not read that.
by Max Lucado.
No.
That's the one I'm reading right now. And it's, I mean, completely what you just said resonates with me too, because it starts right
Right.
here, right?
Yep.
So what we put in there, and and then there's 18 inches between your head and your
Mhm.
heart.
Yeah.
Right?
And sometimes that's the
Oh,
longest 18 inches. I know things here, but I
amen.
don't live them from
Yes.
and that was really the change and the transformation of why I quit the corporate world and started doing what I'm doing now. It finally made
Right.
it from here to here.
Yeah, for sure. A daily habit that grounds you.
So if my staff is listening to this, they're going to just roll their eyes. But I have 3 strategies every day that I do, and I actually require not just my children to do it, but employees. You're going to do spiritual development every day. You're going to do physical development every day, and you're going to do mental development every day. So that means you might take some meditation time. You might take some move your body because the endorphins need to get functioning.
Yes.
And then you're going to learn something new every day. And I challenge people to learn something outside of your sphere because it was a couple of guys in a bike shop that solved the flight issue, right? They're the ones that outside of their
Yes.
industry, they had revelation that solved the issue that the flight industry was working on. So as a rule, breakthrough comes outside of your framework. So learn something outside of your framework.
That's so good. I love that. Well, I could keep going on and on. I've got lots more lightning questions, but we're running up against the clock here. I have to ask you, this is called something extra.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron, what's the something extra that every leader needs?
So the something extra that I think we are taught, especially in the industry that I was in, to be risk averse. We strategize around it. We buy insurance around it to make
Yes.
sure that we don't have that risk. The problem is that as a Christian business person, faith is the center of everything I do. And if I look through the Bible and I see faith, it looks a lot like risk. And so I'm trying to change my language. The something extra is to take faith, not just as a concept, but as an application, a substance of things hoped for, but the evidence of things that are just not seen. And that's risky. So every business leader that you can extrapolate this down to, you just need to be more comfortable with risk because that's where the beauty is. It's messy. Family's risky. Having kids and getting married is all risky, but it's beautiful when it's done.
Yeah.
Right?
That's so good. I've never had anyone say
No.
that out of 377 guests. So thank you. I love it. Woo! All right, Aaron, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. And I just know that your story is going to help our listeners.
Awesome. I really appreciate you posting this and pulling this community together, Lisa.
Something Extra with Lisa Nichols is a Technology Partners production. Copyright Technology Partners, Inc. 2019. To learn more about this week's guest, check out the show notes at tpi.co/podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, consider leaving us a review. Thank you for listening to Something Extra.